Hello and welcome back to the Which Bookie YouTube channel. I'm joined again by Will Smith and we will be taking you through every single race for the Saturday of the Aintree Grand National meeting. That means we'll be telling you who is going to win the Grand National. So as I always say, make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you can be and you want to. Drop a like for the video, please. That always helps us out. Drop a comment below with what your best bet might be for Saturday. And then Will, I mean, I do need some help from the viewers, but I need some help from you as well on some of these races because it's some good action, but probably been a theme of the week. It's pretty competitive racing in the main, none more so than the first race, the Handicap Hurdle over 3 miles and half a furlong. Max Fielder 22, we touched on it before we came on, that a few horses have been balloted out as well. We've got Jericho de Repene head in the market. We've got Catchem Derry second in the betting. It's 6-1 top price Jericho de Repene, and then it's 17-2 top price Catchem Derry. Active Authorities, maybe third favourite with some firms, but as big as 12-1. Timmy Tuesdays as big as 12-1. Bill Joyce is 14s. Nurse Susan's 14s. Camsonas is 16s. Navajo Indies 16s. And then it's 20-1 bar. But amongst those that are 20-1 bar, there's a handful that are still as short as 11 and 12-1, Will. So you've probably got at least half of the field that at some point could be single figures for this race. Looks a minefield. And this is one that I've been scratching my head on because I haven't had too much time to go through it since final declarations. But other than the horses being balloted out, not much has changed. Everyone wanted to run in this, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. It's a really good race. I mean, there's plenty of horses, like we said, that have been balloted out that were on a short list that I thought might be interesting each way prospects. So more of them when they appear, if they do appear for the remainder of this season. But for the here and now, for this race, it appears as if the early prices, the layers have focused on the Potemps final form. Obviously, Jericho de Repene and Catchem Derry at the top of the market for most of the firms. And of the two at the prices, as things stand, I'd much prefer Catchem Derry, I must admit, because Jericho de Repene had a really nice trip through the Potemps. Very similar position to the winner, Doddy the Great. He was sort of prominent on the outside with plenty of room, given every chance to run really, really well backed in first-time cheap pieces. And he ran a race that you expected him to do off the back of a couple of eye-catching efforts. But Catchem Derry is a horse who, he's improved all the way through this season really nicely. And he came from miles back in that Potemps final in a race that wouldn't have suited. Sometimes you can see that happen on the new course. So of those at the top of the market from that Potemps final, Catchem Derry is, if you can still get sort of 8-1, 17-2, I think he'll be an obvious play with the extra places. But as I said, there's a whole host of other horses here that I think the prices over the next 24 hours will even out. We'll get some bigger prices about those that have just been kind of put in at standard 10-14-1. We'll get some of those that have drifted out. The likes of Timmy Tuesday, I think, could appreciate this step up to 3 miles. Park of Kings, who I was keen for in the Martin Pipe, never near a run really on ground that was perhaps lively. Perhaps stepping up to 3 miles could bring about more from Park of Kings, so he'd be of interest. Camsonas loves this track. Navajo Indies, an interesting stepping up to 3 miles as well, all the way up from 2 miles. He's been outpaced over 2 miles on a couple of occasions. And Rushmount is very, very interesting as well. He comes out of that race won by Percival Galwar over hurdles at the Dublin Racing Festival. He's won a small race at Thurles since then, but 3 miles decent ground will really suit him as well. So bit of a minefield, really. All of those that I've mentioned are probably priced between about 8 and 16-1 at the minute. So you'd hope some of those might just shift out a little bit and we can sort of get, 16-1 plus about some of them. But yeah, keep tuned for the article and see which way we go. And once you've got those, probably back the others that I've mentioned.
Yeah, it does look one of those races. There's 6 places up for grabs in a couple of places, 5 generally, but I feel like most of them might follow suit and go for 6 places in here. As Will touched on, there will be a link in the description for the website. I'm sure you guys all know it by now, whichbookie.co.uk for the tips. Yeah, so I don't think I can add too much to that, Will. There's so many horses that are stepping up in trip that the unknown with them, I mean, it could bring about improvement, but then some of them it almost could be, dare I say, a bit of desperation because it's nice ground and you get a runner on Saturday at the Grand National meeting. I think Bo Zenith of one of the horses that's stepping up is quite interesting because he was eye-catching behind Mirabad when Mirabad just nicked the race, but that was after a long layoff. Then he was bad at Ascot when well fancied, but I mean, beaten by Altabelli, he was bound to win that race in hindsight. And then they dropped him back to 2 miles for the Imperial Cup. And I was thinking, well, actually, maybe that's it then. Maybe it was just a never near, and maybe that's the pace he needs to go. But he just never travelled in that race. And then in hindsight, going back to the Mirabad race, with respect to that horse, he was running over 2 miles outpaced against lesser quality opponents. So really dropping back to 2 miles probably wasn't the key to him. Maybe stepping up to 3 miles would actually see a bit about him. But like you said, with the market sorting itself out, he's a top price 20-1, as low as 11-1. Parker King, as you mentioned, was a top price 20-1. He's as low as 10-1. So it's going to sort itself out. And a horse like Beau Zenith, when he did run well at the start of the season, for all that he's been supported since as well, he got smashed late on. So I'd keep an eye on what happens with him in the market. But yeah, almost anything could probably win this race. I do need to do a bit more work. Maybe we'll find a bet in there. Maybe not. There's plenty else to get stuck into, though, Will.
Yeah.
The Mersey Novices Hurdle has changed complexion, I don't want to say multiple times, but I just don't think anyone thought Lulamba was going to come here originally. But obviously now Lulamba does come here in receipt of £10, following a second place in the Triumph. On top of the £10 as well, Will, he's actually already pretty close to being £10 clear of all the field on official figures as well, which, of course, is subjective. It's someone's opinion. But I looked at 4-year-olds that had run in this race in the past. We have had a winner of them recently. It was 16-1 Pope, maybe I say recently, 2009, I think it was. Back in the early 90s, there was a 3 or 4 in a row, I think it was. So it's doable in this race. There's been 33 that have tried, I think, since 1997. Only one's won it. Interesting, there's been like 4 favourites that have come in this race that have all been beaten. 2 of those finished second in a Triumph. One of them finished third, and then the other one didn't run at Cheltenham, but came here off the back of a pretty impressive debut. Now, all that said, those stats and trends are irrelevant in this race because Lulamba's £10 clear of them, gets the £10, and the horses where those other ones where they'd come second in Triumph had run and got beaten, they're actually beaten by horses that were rated higher than them anyway, for all that they were getting the allowance. So I've gone around the houses in saying that I think the trainer and the jockey know far more than anyone else does about the fact that Lulamba has got his best chance of winning at this meeting in this race. He should have improved for his run at Cheltenham because they wanted to get a prep in beforehand. The 11-8 that's about him now, of course, doesn't look anywhere near as good as the 5-1 that was available in the week, but probably comparing this to the race that he could have run in the juvenile, which would have been okay, but the way that the McManus horse has been backed, you think that's an absolute good thing now. 11-8 about him doesn't look terrible when he would have been odds on for the other race, I suspect. So I'm finding it hard to get away from him because if I start to look away from him, I just look at Cocktail Diving or Cocktail Divin as the most likely one as sort of the each way play to get against him. But you'd lose money if he does get beat. I was thinking maybe if they open up a without market that maybe he's the way to play it in there, but I wouldn't be 100% sold because he was bad behind Cowabunga for all that's quite a nice horse. Quite like Brian Hughes being on Miami Magic. But again, I feel like I'm just looking for a bet when actually the only bet in the race really is Lulamba while he's odds against. So, with all that said, does Lulamba just win or is there another way in?
I think the market is absolutely right with the front 2, definitely. Lulamba, clear pick for me. I think it's a real thinking outside the box bit of placing here from trainer and jockey and owner, whoever it was that came up with the plan. Look, I think he'd win the 4-year-old hurdle race on the Thursday as we speak today as well. But I think this gives him a bit more of a chance just to find his feet. I mean, he's still so young, still so inexperienced. 2.5 miles will be fine for him. He'll stay that, I've no doubt. If you stay 2 miles 1 on the new course at Cheltenham in a well-run race, you'd have no doubt about 2.5 miles at Aintree. I don't think his pedigree is strong on stamina as well. He has some similarities to Sagino, but I don't think he's as quick as Sagino inherently. So, yeah, I think he's going to be mightily tough to beat. And I'm a big fan of Cocktail Divin as well, actually. I think he, for all that he was well beaten behind Cowabunga and William Money, a couple of reasons for that. A, they're very, very good horses. B, the ground was pretty soft that day back in last week of January. And the stable hadn't turned a corner at that point as well. So, yeah, I think these two will be first and second probably. And then, I mean, you can get the markets without the front 2 quite regularly now as we get closer to post time. And that'll be probably where I look. There's 2 horses in here that I think should really be a lot closer to those top 2 at the market than they are. Fingal Bridge is the first of them for Ollie Murphy, who won a nice listed novice hurdle at Exeter, beating the re-opposing Regent Stroll here. I think he's only going to improve for the extra couple of furlongs. I'd just be slightly mindful of the ground. I don't think they'd risk him if it turned out to be genuine good ground. So he might well be a non-runner if they're not happy that there's enough juice in it. But if there was, he's a big player. And Castle Carrick, who's 50-1 in the outright market, is a massive player, I think, as well, for Alan King. I know because he finished third in a Grade 2 at Kelso, you're probably thinking, that form needs to be improved upon. But the winner was very impressive, Jet to Vegas. Chart Topper, who was second, he was backed as if defeat was out of the question that day at Kelso. And Castle Carrick beat the rest and hit the line strongly again over 2 miles too. So stepping up in trip will help him, I think. A couple of bigger prices there to perhaps have a look at in some of those more exotic markets. But Lalamba, Cocktail Divin, if you're that kind of way inclined, that could be your forecast, really. I'd be very hard pushed to push either of those two out the first 2 spots.
Absolutely. Nice. Well, it looks fairly straightforward, dare I say, in the Mersey Novice, but there's also a bit of an extra angle in there thrown in by Will. Good stuff for that, mate. Right, moving on to the 2:30, 3 mile 1 furlong handicap chase. Anyone that's watched the Thursday video will know that Will's already put up a selection for this race. He's now shorter than when you put the horse up, so value regardless, Will.
Value loser. Excellent.
Maybe, yeah, because we do have Mertown in here, head in the market. 130. I'll just quote the top prices while we're doing this. Imperial Saints 8-1. Doc Picked Me's 9-1. Dr. Ken's 12-1. We've all been caught 12-1. 14-1 for Peaky Boy. Having his second run for John Joe O'Neill. Happy Go Lucky's 16-1. Lamilos 18-1. And then it's 20-1 bar, Will. So I'm curious to know your thoughts. Obviously, Merstown's been declared. I know you've touched on this on the Thursday that you don't mind the bet even if he's in the race. But now he is in the race. Do you think Mertown genuinely warrants being a 3-1 favourite for this race, given I don't think anyone's ever won the Ultima around this?
No, well, probably not many have tried, I'd imagine. Usually if you go and win the Ultima, then you're up into different races like the National maybe, or going up into open company graded chases. But it's interesting, that Connections run him here. They had the option of the Grade 1 over 3 miles on the Friday, which they've sidestepped. I thought that would have been an interesting option. They're never usually scared of running, their better horses in Grade 1s at this particular meeting. Look, he's got £15 higher mark to counteract, but he'd have won that race at Cheltenham with £15 on his back without a shadow of a doubt. I think he's one as well that ground is interesting for. They've kept him away from good or lively ground, genuinely. So that would be a small bit of a worry, but clearly he's going to go very, very well. I mean, he's a progressive young chaser. But I did have, when I first looked at the market and I thought to myself, even if Mayertown does run and the claims of Imperial Saint, who was the pick that I put up a couple of days ago, I'd still have them vying for joint favoritism. So the fact they're not, I still think that perhaps Imperial Saint is a bet here in around about the 7-1, 15-2 mark. He's been fiercely progressive this season as a novice chaser. And I think the key angles for me are he's 3 from 3 around Aintree. He's going to improve up to 3 miles. Of that, I've no doubt. You watch his penultimate run at Cheltenham on trials day. He got outpaced he sort of got blindsided by Moon d'Orange, who came from nowhere somehow. But he got outpaced just in between the final 2 fences there and ran on and hit the line strongly again. And he ran in the Pendle Novices Chase, and this is the reason I think why he was such a big price a couple of days ago, was because he got beat there. He finished 4th when he was, fairly well fancied, but he just looked like he was all at sea going right-handed. He changed his leads a whole host of times. Micheal Nolan kept having to just edge him back into things, having gone a little bit left, and he just hated Kempton, absolutely hated it. And his raw ability meant that he was still in there with a shout 2 out. Novices at this time of year in handicaps, I'm a big fan of. I think we saw that at the Cheltenham Festival with the 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 5th home in the plate handicap chase. They were all novices that could have run in the earlier novices handicap chase, but Connections were keen to use their unexposed nature. And I think there's more to come from Imperial Saint. Loves the track, should appreciate the step up in trip. And he's taken on a bunch of, with all due respect, exposed handicappers apart from Mayertown.
Oh, I like it. And I'm glad that you've still got the bullishness about you as well. And it's a solid case that's talked about with him in there. When I talked about Ultima winners coming in here, I can't remember how many have actually tried, but in terms of Ultima runners, we have had a couple of winners of the race that had run in an Ultima. Both of those came second. One of them is Happy Go Lucky, who can test this again as an 11-year-old. Now, Will, when people were doing previews for Cheltenham and they were talking about Happy Go Lucky in the Ultima, I could see it from the fact of what he'd done in the past. But I've done lots of things in the past. I'm pretty sure I couldn't run a 5K the same time as I could a decade ago. But in all fairness to him, especially considering Maya Town would have won with another £15 on top of his back, he was only beaten 14 lengths. So he was only beaten 4 lengths by the changing man in that race. Considering his run prior to that was after a near 700-day absence. And we'll all remember, we definitely will all remember, because I'm sure everyone would have been on it. We'll all remember, was it 2021 when he was smashed up to go and win the Ultima at Cheltenham? Didn't, but then came here, posted exactly the same RPR, didn't need to do any more, and won at Aintree. Maybe history's going to repeat itself. I think him at 16-1 does look like a reasonable bet for the 5 places. For all that I was worried about him at Cheltenham, he's sort of blown out of the water in my theory that he's just an old horse. He's not the same horse anymore. I do get the concern that he's an old one and he might not take his racing as well, but when we go back to that 2021 victory in this race, sounds like it's ages ago because it's 4 years. He's only had 6 runs since then. And there have been horses of age that have won this. Sam Brown won it as a 10-year-old when he slammed Chamblou, who was the absolute good thing that year, by 15 lengths. We've had an 11-year-old win it not so long ago. 10-year-old won it when they were winning the race back-to-back. Go further back, there's been another 11-year-old earlier this century, I think. And then there's been I'm pretty sure there's been a 12-year-old winning this race as well. So, like, age doesn't necessarily have to put you off on this one. I thought at 16 he's like an obvious shortener. Mertown I fully respect, but I think he was £12 clear on his last RPR from what he ran on last time, and he's only about £3 clear. Again, it's using someone else's figures, but he's just priced accordingly, isn't he? He's very defensively priced around about 3-1 for a race where you've got horses that we know like it at the track. We've got horses that we know can take runs in quick succession as well. And Imperial Saint's course form does stand out massively, doesn't it? So I don't think I'll be having a massive play, but I think I'll have a go on Happy Go Lucky and then enjoy watching the race. Fingers crossed for Imperial Saint beats him if anything does. I like Imperial Saint. He did me a couple of turns at the start of the season. 144 feels quite high, but they've clearly targeted this meeting with the last couple of runs that they've thrown into him. And like you say, he's 3 from 3 here. Fingers crossed. Right. Yeah. Well, the Liverpool Hurdle, it doesn't get any easier to start solving some of these races. Maybe it does in your view, but we've got a decent field in this Liverpool Hurdle. 13 have been declared. Tiapu heads the market at 5-2. Kits Boohal, the 5-year-old for Willie Mullins, stepping up significantly in trip. He's 5-1 top price. I'll keep quoting the top prices. Home by the Lees, 7-1, unseated in the Stairs Hurdle at Cheltenham. Strong Leader, of course, won this 12 months ago, bypassed Cheltenham. Top price, 15-2. I'll quote a bit lower because that's a standout price. He's 13-2 generally for this race. The Wall Park's 15-2. It is 10-1 bar those. That horse that is 10-1 is Gwenny May Boy, that was very impressive in the Rendlesham at Haydock, but surely can't do it again. There's some big prices in there for other horses that you probably could make bits of cases for, Will, but how do you see this one? I know people always say with Tiapu, they found the key to him because he likes a long layoff, and people say that he's a mudlark. But surely what he did at Cheltenham, a repeat of that, for all that people may say he can't do it in a quick turnaround, surely that would be good enough to win this, wouldn't it?
It'll put him right in there, definitely. I mean, he's a tricky horse to predict in some respects, but he does, always run his race between a kind of £10 range. So he's not going to chuck in an absolute stinker. That's you'd imagine pretty sure. It's just whether tactics on the day, whether the ground is soft enough for him. They're the kind of things that you're thinking about with regards to Tiapu. I happily let him win at the price he is. I think that, had he come to Aintree last year off the back of winning the Stayers Hurdle at Cheltenham, he wouldn't have been a 5-2 shot that day at all. So, could you perhaps be onto a value bet here for a horse that still ran right up to form at Cheltenham and just didn't quite have things go his way? I could see that angle. It's not for me. Kitsbull, the next in, just a complete unknown quantity. He's looked good in 2 2-mile races. Fascinating that they're pitching him right up to 3 miles in here. I mean, with all due respect to the horses that he's beaten, they're, for all that the Stayers division can be weak and look open, it would still need a good bit of improving upon, but he could do that up in trip, and he's only a 5-year-old. So fascinating. He could have run in the Aintree Hurdle, of course, today, but I guess Connections had Lossiemouth. So, to have a runner in the Liverpool Hurdle, who knows, really. I did think Gwenny May Boy was probably the overpriced horse in the race, actually. Again, he's been a massive improver through the handicap ranks, as you say, but the way he won that Handicap Hurdle on this day last year, if you compare that race with this race, the Liverpool Hurdle, he actually ran a faster final circuit time compared with Strong Leader, the winner of that race that day. He was carrying a few less pounds, but I think he's probably improved since then, and his win in the Rendlesham Hurdle suggests that he definitely has as well. So I could see him definitely outrunning that price of 10-1. If you can get 4 places with a couple of firms, and I don't think you can get 10-1 with those firms, but even 8-9-1, 4 places about Gwenny May Boy, I'd be amazed if there are 4 horses that are better suited and potentially more progressive than he is. Whether he's going to be quite good enough to win, not completely sold on that, but he could be one that outruns his price, definitely. I think he'll be in the shake-up.
I like it. I think as it stands at the moment, I feel like I want to be kind to Teahupoo. Wanted to take him on this season in the Stairs Hurdle all through the year because of the fact that he was very defensively priced. But by the time it came to it on the day, sort of a 9-4 shot for the Stairs Hurdle, and you look at it thinking, he's been there, done it, and he's going to run to some sort of number. And he did just bump into a very good horse that loves Cheltenham Festival and just got beat by a better horse on the day. But they were well clear of everything else. And I would say it again. Luckily, this is the last one of the Aintree Festival we're doing. But Jack Kennedy was on, and he's not riding for the rest of this season. And I know it's gutting that they got beat. They got beat by an owner mate as well. But I just think that Teahupoo, you could probably argue that there may be a tiny bit more in him than what he showed there. And he still put up the same RPR as he did when he won the race 12 months prior. I just don't think the form of, I know Aintree form is solid. I just don't think the form of this race last year is as good as what he's done in those 2 Stairs Hurdles. And I was worried about him at Punchestown for all that he had enough of a break in between. I think it was still 50 odd days in between there, or near enough to it. I was a tiny bit worried about it if they say that he needs to be so fresh, but he absolutely hacked up there. And as much as he is sort of pigeonholed as being a bit of a mudlark, the Cheltenham ground won't be dissimilar to this. Of course, it'll be a little bit faster. But he's beaten Honeysuckle over 2.5. He's beaten Impere Pass over 2.5. So I know they're on more testing conditions, but he's not as slow as people make out. And if you took Bob Ollinger out of that race at Cheltenham, he'd have been an 8-length winner of the race. And then you wonder what sort of price he'd be in here. So I feel like 5-2 is just too generous to want to take him on at that price. Like Kitzbühel could be anything, but you might get people that think that's an each way price to take him on. But I wonder, he's either going to win it and be the next good thing because the division needs it, or he might not even finish anywhere. So I don't really see the appeal with him. The only one at a big price that I always talk about is Jatara. She gets £7. She was very good when she stayed the time before. In the Mayor's Hurdle, I thought she probably ran okay, and she's got loads to final figures. But if Teahupoo was to just bomb because he doesn't like the ground or the turnaround's too quick, she doesn't have that much to find of everything else, and she's a top price 40-1. But most firms for 13 runners are only offering 3 places at the moment. That might change because we're recording early, but I definitely wouldn't want to be backing her each way at 40s for only 3 places. And if you had to extend the places and her price came down, then wouldn't be looking at her at all. But reaching a little bit with her, I think I'm probably still going to stick with Teahupoo. And I say take him as a value loser. I think regardless of my mind, I think 5-2 about him is way too big a price. This is as easy a task as his race at Cheltenham, for all that people will say the conditions might not suit. Gordon knows what he's doing as well. He wouldn't be running him this quick if he didn't think he could handle it, because Punchestown sat there for the taking, isn't it? So yeah, we'll see what happens. But again, with Teahupoo, for him to run well, you do want to see support for all that he drifted near the start of the Stairs Hurdle. In terms of the few days before, on the actual day, the money did come from him, and it did the year before when he won. So I'd happily sit and wait at 5-2. When he's a general shot with that, I don't want to rush in with it because I think I can get that anyway. But if the money does start to come, I suspect it will continue to come. Right, Will, the big one, the one race of the season that everyone will probably ask you who wins the Grand National, and then you'll probably get told off with, oh, no one can pick the winner of the Grand National. Who would tip in a Grand National? You just can't please anybody in this, but it's a real good race this year. There's loads of talk about different types of horses in here, such as your Irokos, that if you spoke to him in the beginning of the season, the Grand National was always the plan. And I know he's had objectives throughout the season and people have been disappointed with what he's done. but they weren't lying. They said at the start of the season, he's a national horse. We're campaigning him like that. So he sat where he sat. He's been a little bit weak in the market as we've got closer to it. We've got Stumptown that's now clear favourite after a good win in Cheltenham in that cross country, which has been a good launch pad for national horses. Hewick's 10-1. I could guess the drying ground and the fact that he's a lovable rogue that people want to get on side with him. I Am Maximus has won this before from the same dad as Tiger Roll Authorised. He's 10-1. 10-1 Intense Raffles. We've got 10-1 Vanilla. I've already mentioned Iroko. Percival de Gaulois 12-1. 14-1 Manila Kakuna. And then there's obviously a whole host of horses that are 20-1 or bigger. But the race has changed its complexion. A lot of Grand National winners in recent years have been fairly short priced. And I say fairly short priced in the context of it being a Grand National. They've been sort of 12-1 or shorter. So have you changed the way that you look at a Grand National now, given the fact that it maybe has been a bit easier to find the winner? Or do you still use the same methods of what you've used for all these years?
No, it's changed. Yeah, definitely changed quite drastically in the recent past, definitely. When I first grew up with the race, it was completely different. Even someone of my age, for all that you might say I'm getting on a little bit now, you speak to some people who are slightly of a more older vintage and they can remember it being, just a complete lottery. And you actually watch some of those editions back and you do think in the current prism of how we view horse racing these days, they look a little bit unedifying, I must admit, some of them. So in many ways, I'm glad it's changed for that way. And you say it's, I think that the worry with the race for those people that like it how it was that it was just going to turn into another, glorified handicap chase, really, and it wouldn't find out those unique types of horses. But I still think it does, really. I mean, it's an extreme stamina test. You've still got to jump well. For all that it's a different jumping kind of test. It maybe suits the classier types now because it will attract those types of runners, the way the weights are framed, etc. And I think the worry was that because it would just be chock full of those classy types who are perhaps 9 and older, rated 160 plus, who have run in all those graded chases, perhaps ex-Gold Cup winners, and this is going to be their chance to have another heyday again. There's not actually any of those types that have gone and won the race itself. It's all been won by still the unexposed, potentially improving type of horse who takes well to this particular test. We'll have more horses fill the first 10 positions that are probably of that other type of horse, the classier once Gold Cup winner as such. But yeah, there's still, you look at the list of winners, you've still got to find the right horse at the right time on the upward curve. And with that in mind, I've backed 2 in the race and I put them up on the column a while ago. And I keep going through the race actually, and I've gone through it again now. And I'm not sure I'm going to add any more really, unless something really, pops into my mind from somewhere else. So I'm pretty happy with the 2 I've got, touch wood. I can't see anything changing that wouldn't put me off them, would put me off them. And they are Iroko and Monbeg Genius. They're the 2 for me. If, like you said, you get asked that question from people who phone you up once a year and say, what are you backing for the national, or what should I back? They'll be the 2 I say. I might just say 4 words, Iroko and Monbeg Genius, and hang up the phone and save a bit of time. Or maybe I'll put it on my answer phone message. How about that?
That'd be even easier, wouldn't it? Yeah, it would definitely be one of those types of victories of Iroko that, especially when trainers have been honest and the campaign's been honest with it too, that if they go and win like a good thing, you just look back and just think, should have just literally just paid attention and stopped trying to look to take on maybe the obvious. I'm sort of lukewarmish, I guess, on him. I feel bad in this one as well. We talked in a 9-runner race the other day where we were saying hopefully we get 4 places. 34 runners will, and not even every firm's got 6 places. Some of them have still got 5. Like, it's disgusting. And the worst part is, I don't mind if they want to be tight with the place terms, but they make the win purposes a bit bigger. When you've got so many horses that are, we've got 6 or 7 horses that are 10-1 at the top of the market without there being some juicy each way places. It stinks a little bit, but I feel like Iroko, I would like to get on side, maybe on some sort of exchange. I mean, he's 10-1 with a sports book. You're probably going to be getting 15, 16s on an exchange because they're.
Well, I would say if you want to back him, he's 9-1 with Betfred for 7 places, which, that to me is a pretty fair price and a very good sort of place term offer as well about him.
Absolutely, and it's worth shopping about with those. Obviously, if you've got accounts available, etc. But like I say, from the win, if you're having win darts on a national, then that's obviously a brave thing to do. But the each way terms, especially when they're extended, often they reduce the win part of the bet, right? And then it makes it not so good or viable to do it. But I think I want to get Iroko on side. Stumptown did me a good favour at Cheltenham, so I feel like sentimentally, it being a Grand National, he's a horse that I'd want to look at, and I'd be happy if he won. But I think I could probably leave him at 8-1. But then again, if on the exchanges he's 12s, 13s, 14s, then it wouldn't cost much to have a couple of quid on him. The ones, I mean, with the Grand National, unless I've really got a view on one from a way out, I find it a difficult race to get into. I think looking back at some of the form, unless you see something through the season that makes you think they're doing this for a reason, whether it's a comment or you've thought about it from the season before, unless I think you've got that bit of information, looking at the race card now, unless you go back and watch every single horse's run for the last year and a half, you're going to struggle to see one that jumps out. Gordon Elliott, though, keeps saying, unprompted, that Phil Dorr is going to go well at a massive price. And I keep looking at him because this is the first time he's stepping up to an extreme distance. He's a Dr. Dino, I think, and he's not exactly bred. Well, there's nothing in the family that stays more than 2 miles mostly, but he's run over like 3 miles recently behind Say Majest. Like he's got to qualify under the conditions to be able to like stay this type of trip. He's been kept at sort of the middle distance, but I just find it very, I don't know, very telling that he's said it on so many occasions, and he's an 80-1 shot here. Again, the extended places are pretty bad for those ones, but who knows what it will spin out as. So he's one that I have struck a little bit of money on. And the reason why I say about the trainers' comments type stuff, I know anyone could probably find this stuff out, and I should have a stronger opinion of my own constitution. But we were talking about Woodford when we did the previews, and we was questioning whether we thought she was quite up to the standard that she was coming out as, and he said it on every preview. She was like almost a good thing for the Martin Pipe. So you know when there's just certain comments that I think are worth listening to. The way he's talked about Phil Dorr, I can't believe he's still the price he is. So that probably could be an obvious shortener. And then the only other one that I had bet for this race, when I talk about having a view a long way out, was I Know the Way You're Thinking. So the fact that he's not running, I am annoyed. You talk about those Gold Cup type horses. May have been the case that he would have finished down the place and I wouldn't have got paid. But yeah, I think I'm happy just sitting with Phil Dorr. And then I might, like I say, have a little bit on Iroko, possibly a little bit on Stumptown just for the sake of enjoying the race. But looks a very good renewal, I think. And I can't wait to see how it all pans out.
Yeah, classy renewal, definitely. I mean, Willie Mullins has, out of the top 8 in the weights, he's got 5 of them who are all, very likely types, very classy types on their day. Manella Kakuna, I could see going well. Grange Clare West. Nick Rocket, of course, comes into it in great form. And last year's winner, I Am Maximus. So might be some of those more interesting offers and markets. There might be, say, someone offering, I don't know, a price about Willie Mullins to have 4 finish in the first 10 or something like that. You could easily see that being a potential angle. Or JP McManus to have 4 in the first 10. That would also be a live possibility for sure.
Yeah, they do those because lots of people talk about it, didn't they? About like it was going to be an Irish 1, 2, 3, 4 like every year, and there was a good period when that was happening. Because the one more recently, just to close off on the Grand National, the one more recently I genuinely think could run well was Highland, because I thought his run behind Katati Dory was very, very, very good. And obviously that was a run where it doesn't affect his weights or anything. I think 147 off of him. He can definitely win a big race off of this. I've just always had, I don't want to say a bee in my bonnet, but I've always just had like a gremlin in my brain that says Nicky Henderson with like Grand Nationally type horses. I just don't associate him as much with real strong stamina laden like type horses, because I think he's had a few in the past that have been like well fancied for national hunt chases, and I know he's like a multiple Gold Cup winning trainer, but I don't know whether he's the right man to be training a horse that like Highland I think fits the profile of a national type. I don't know whether we're going to get it out of him, but again, I'm probably being harsh on that one. 20-1 about him for people that like him, I still think is probably fair. And obviously, me to say that Nicky Henderson can't train a Grand National winner from someone that I couldn't train anything is a bit of a, like, I don't mean it to come across as rude as it sounds, but that would be the thing that's stopping me wanting to back Highland is that, like I said, that nagging gremlin have the back of my mind that just stay away from Nicky Henderson in Grand Nationals. But I think the horse has got a chance. Good race. To be fair, most of them have got a chance, which is nice to see, because you do sometimes get it filled with a handful of horses that shouldn't really be there because then they've got no business winning the race. But yeah, it looks a good renewal, especially for the modern version. Right, Will, I think we've given the Grand National enough attention. Now it's on to the race of Saturday, maybe not. The Maghull Novices Chase, the grade 1 over 2 miles. Obviously, there could have been an Arkle winner that comes in here, which is typically what happens. But Django Bay's going for that 2.5 miler, which means that Only by Night, that was second in that race, comes into this race. Loader that they said they learnt so much about in the Arkle. They've put a tongue-tie and cheek piece combination in this race. We've got Khalif de Burley in there for Paul Nicholls, Harry Cobden, Special Cadeau, Brookie, and Touch Me Not for Gordon Elliott's in as well. So it's maybe not the top standard of it, but then the Arkle division did get depleted with Sagino going, and then obviously we've got no Majborough here, and then Django Bay, the actual winner, changing his trip. But it's a good enough clash. I was very much of the view that Loader in the Arkle was probably the only horse that had zero excuses, and he came fourth. So I can't get that out of my mind, especially at Cheltenham. I do think this type of track probably could suit him, and Only by Night was in front of him, but I don't really rate her either. So I wouldn't want to say that Loader wasn't good enough to win an Arkle, so he shouldn't be able to win this. And then I don't want to use that as the basis of saying, well, then Only by Night should win this, because I don't really think she's that good. I think she was a bit flattered with what happened. So I'm probably against the front two in there, but I don't know whether I can bring myself to make a strong enough case for anything else to want to bet against them. The only one that I do think is probably a stupid price now is Touch Me Not, who's 20-1, because for all that things haven't necessarily planned out for that horse, he was miles beaten in an Arkle. He was only 5-1 behind Loader when they ran at Sandown, and everyone says if he hadn't have made the mistakes that he made, he would have beaten Loader. Now, he hasn't just overnight turned into a bad horse. The run after he ran behind Majborough when, Majborough is just a very, very good horse. We saw that in the Arkle for all that he didn't win. And I just think now the 20-1 about him, come into Aintree on a track that possibly could suit him more than Cheltenham did, and I think it would definitely suit him more than Sandown would. I thought 20-1 about him just looked ridiculous, but that is all said on the fact that Loader disappointed me in the Arkle, and I'm sort of anti Only by Night because I just don't think she's good enough to win this. So I've waffled quite a bit on there, Will, and I think Touch Me Not 20s is definitely the one that I'd probably be wanting to side with at this stage. Am I being overly critical, especially of those front two in the market?
Possibly, although I could see the reasons to think that they're beatable. Definitely, the Arkle was a funny race, like you said. I mean, Majborough at that trip on that day, raw ability wise, take the jumping out of it, was the best horse on that day. It's just his jumping completely let him down. So as a result, I think Loader perhaps got to the front a bit soon, and also Only by Night got to the front a bit too soon as well, which just left them vulnerable because nothing was really pushing them on late on, and they got their pockets picked by Django Bay. So I think with Loader it's interesting they've got the cheek pieces on here, because I don't know if this will be as well run as the Arkle. In fact, I'd be amazed if it was, actually, because really I could only see Touch Me Not as being a potential horse to actually go forward and take them along. Unless there's a bit of a change of heart with some of the other connections. So I don't know if that's going to suit Loader because I think they'll want to ride him a little bit colder and produce him late, which is how Only by Night is generally ridden as well. So I think that the horse in here that I probably will back, and if the prices are similar now in sort of 24, 36 hours or so, it'll be Khalif de Burley, who I think is a really, really good horse waiting to happen. What he did at Newbury on his first completed chase start, and then Cheltenham in admittedly only a 3-runner event on more ground that was a lot more suitable to him compared to the Scilly Isles race at Sandown. The times he clocked on better ground that day before Christmas were really, really good. And he just looks like the absolute, ideal Paul Nicholls horse that they've kept fresh to come to Aintree and produce a career best performance. And I think if he does, I think even if he reproduces one of his 2 runs from before Christmas time, I think he's right in there with those front 2 in the market anyway. And I think he's got the most scope to improve because he's lightly raced and he'll get his ground. And I think he's a pretty speedy horse at 2 miles. So I think that he's the price he is because we haven't seen him. And the last time we saw him, he was beaten a good way in the Scilly Isles. But 2.5 miles, stiff track at Sandown, heavy ground, just not him at all. So he's probably a bet for me. Anything sort of north of 4-1, I think.
Yeah, he's available 9-2 generally. He is top price 5-1 at the time of recording. And yeah, that Newbury run, which is a massive benefit for him because that's left-handed, and Touch Me Not is overly better right-handed, but I wouldn't dismiss him this way around. But, I remember watching that run because I tipped up Tedley, or I thought maybe dogged it a tiny bit in that race, but I was impressed with the performance of Khalif de Burley to do what he did, given the weight away that he was doing, given the fact that it was only his second start over fences. And yeah, I do think the Sandown run, maybe, well, I don't want to say it's not being taken in the right light, because I think people know that maybe the ground didn't suit, the trip didn't suit him, but it's probably being forgotten the fact that he had nothing in his favour that day, so you can very quickly draw a line for it, can't you? So, well, yeah. In some way, Will, we're in agreement that probably take on the front couple in the market, but that might happen by Saturday. There could be some price changes between now and then. But as it stands, we've got 6-4 Loaded, 15 to 8 Only by Night, 5 to 1 Khalif de Burley, 20 to 1 Special Cadeau, 33 to 1 Rookie, and then Touch Me Not is now 20 to 1. So not sure why the order's the way it is, but it still looks a very nice race, isn't it? I think if one of them is going to be a superstar, I mean, Loaded could be good, but I'm not a fan of novices that need headgear this early on. I would imagine that Khalif de Burley could be that one that's something a little bit special. So
yeah, I agree.
Fingers crossed one of us is right, Will. Right, we've got the bumper to close out the Saturday. It's a Grade 2. I say typically a nice race. I think it is always a nice race. Sometimes with the bumper sphere, it doesn't always translate into these being future stars, but if you treat them in their own respective, you get some nice horses going against each other. They get a chance to have a good season bumper in. I think this one looks like a reasonable renewal. The market's quite open as well, which sometimes we don't get. We sometimes get a real shorty thrown in here. But El Kairos for Maxwell, who ran a massively eye-catching race in Cheltenham, has been installed as a favourite. He's 11-2 top price with Bet365. That's got to be the Maxwell factor, because if it was anybody else, I think this horse would be 2-1. Plenty of horses have come from the champion bumper and won this as well. I think Bacardis was the last one to do it, so just in case anyone's worried about that. Green Splendour, that's for Willie Mullins. He's as short as 11-2, but a top price of 7-1. We've got Mossy Fenroad, 7-1. Lalabo, 17-2. 10-1 Cocktail Brew, 12-1 Quaviste, 14-1 Scope to Improve, 16-1 Dubai Destination, 18-1 Crackerjack, and then there's a whole load of horses that are 25-1 or bigger in here. So, Will, do you have any thoughts on the bumper? I know this isn't really a sphere that you get too far stuck into, but it is the end of the season, and we've seen a few of these runs. So, some opinion, please.
Yeah, well, there is a small opinion for me in here, and that's that Henry de Bromhead's Scope to Improve is probably overpriced. That said with a very big pinch of salt, because these horses, obviously, we don't know anywhere near the full extent of their ability or otherwise. So, could have real improvers. We could have horses that have already shown their best and are going to regress. We just don't know. So, but it looks to me as if, given how well he won on his only start for Henry de Bromhead back in the middle of December when the stable were really cold, he was mightily impressive there. That was on decent enough ground. He gets his ground again today. He's been kept fresh, presumably for this. Could have gone for, any number of bumpers over the last couple of months, you would imagine, assuming all has been well and he's trained fine. So I just thought he was, at the prices as they have first been put up right now, if you can get double figures, I sort of half expected him to be a bit shorter, really. So very lukewarm, tentative opinion, but Scope to Improve in the closing race of the whole 3 days. Feels a long way off that.
It does feel a long way off that. It's crazy we've recorded this on Thursday before the first race is run, and we talk about the last race on the Saturday. But I remember watching that horse, Scope to Improve, when he ran. It was a bit of a messy race as well. It was a classic bumper where they were sort of knocking into each other and stuff, but wasn't shy of still cracking on with it. And you can get it with a few horses, especially in a big field at Aintree when they're all going at it down that home straight. You can get some horses that get intimidated. Interesting that one as well, because I did look at him. The horse that he beat, if all goes well, runs today. So today being Thursday at 5:30 at Naas. He's an 8-11 poke for that. So obviously if he wins, regardless of how impressive he is, I think that will make the 14s and Scope to Improve shorten. Again, those prices are correct at the time of recording. I mean, and even if he gets beat, we'll just forget that horse ran and it's irrelevant because someone is another horse's form. But yeah, he's been held back since December as well. So you'd imagine the day that they ran, the ground was like those types of horses, right? And that's why they've both been held on to till now. So fair one with him. Yeah, I do really like this El Kairos. I think Green Splendour that comes over for Willie Mullins, I don't think it was Patrick's finest moment in the race at Leopardstown when Cole Cannon won. Probably no fault of his own, but he got caught a bit on the inside and had to switch this horse out. And where I talk about the selection you've put up, Scope to Improve, probably enjoying the hustle and bustle of the bumper, this horse looked frightened when he had to be switched and when he got sort of short of room. Took a while for Patrick to get him sort of going again, but he did start to get going again towards the line. I think there's obviously more to come from him, and it is Willie Mullins in a bumper, so it is fairly obvious. 7-1 about him, I don't think is a terrible price though, and I'd probably be looking. I probably would have a win dart on him, but I definitely want to have a go on this El Kairos for David Maxwell as well, because I know I guess there's no other way to say it other than the fact that he's a businessman that rides horses on the side. So I know he hasn't got a claim or anything like that, but like he's not a professional jockey. Sure, he won't mind us saying that because he's not, but he's still a very good horseman. And some horses that he rides, they seem to like almost want to win for him. He has like a really good rapport with them. And you could see that in this horse on his debut at Newbury, like won like an absolute good thing. It was almost like anyone could have sat on top of him. I mean, I definitely couldn't have done. But then in the bumper as well, got short of room. And like I talk about, especially in bumpers where some horses can get intimidated by it. The horse didn't seem to care. As soon as he got a bit of daylight, the horse picked up. And I don't want to say like under another jockey that he might have been able to win the champion bumper, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility. If he'd have had a clear passage and he'd have been in the right place at the right time, he probably could have won a champion bumper. So like good fun for him. I think he's the right favourite, and I think we're getting a bigger price about him because of the Maxwell factor. But then you also do have to consider the Maxwell factor in the fact that he might get short of room again, and I don't know, it might be that the race comes too soon, but fairly boring that it's the front of the market. I've done quite well in the past picking ones at bigger prices, but there's nothing that's jumped out throughout the season, nothing from a breeder perspective that sits in there. But I would definitely agree that Scope to Improve looks overpriced as well at 14-1. So fingers crossed, we're given the TriCast 5-1, 7-1, and 14-1. Will.
There we go. Not many people are getting.
Let's hope we haven't got to wait till the last race to actually get a winner. But if we do and it is the TriCast, then all will be forgiven. But we haven't done this on any of the other videos, Will, and I'm conscious that we are wrapping up to 45 minutes because it's the Grand National and it is Saturday. Would I be able to press you for a best bet on Saturday for the Aintree Grand National?
Let's go. Whether it's a best bet or not, as such, it's a bet that I've had and one that I think and hope is going to give a good bit of interest and hopefully profit. And that's an each-way double on Imperial Saint in the 3 mile 1 furlong Handicap Chase, and Iroko in the National. Would pay around about, I don't know, 700-1, something like that for the each-way double. So
happy days.
And my two main bets, and probably Khalif de Burle would be the other bet on Saturday, but Imperial Saint and Iroko.
I like it. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot as well, especially when it's this early after final declarations, but I like to hear it. I feel like when the question comes out, it makes you realise ones you do fancy a little bit stronger than others. Yeah. Mine would be very boring in the fact that I think Nulamba odds against is actually quite generous. 11-8 about in the time of recording is quite good. I definitely think Tiapu at 5-2 as well. Rates a strong bet, but he would be one I'd still want to see a little bit of market support for him. I just don't think he's that type of horse that they'd be running for the sake of running if they didn't think he was fine for it. And I can't believe he's 5-2, to be honest with you. So they're both sort of value-related bets. They are both favourites, of course, but I do expect them, hopefully, both to win. So, Will, that's the Aintree Festival previews done and dusted. We can sit back now. We can start watching the actual racing. Thank you so much for your time, your insight, as always. We touched on it before, but there'll be a link in the description for the Whichbookie website where you can find all our selections for each and every day when we finalise those. As I said before, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you can and you want to. Drop a like on the video, a comment with your best bet for Saturday, and we will see you again very soon.